Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Planet Quest. Man, it's been a while. It's been a while because Kerbal Space Program has been having a few issues with the mods that I've been using. It wouldn't run correctly, and so couldn't record or anything. But which is really unfortunate because this is my favorite game in the entire world. Anyway, so here I am. I'm launching some satellites into orbit. So this is one of three low orbit communication satellites that I'm putting up. And I'm not really worrying that much about synchronization between the satellites. I figure that I can do that bit later on. They are going up with some fuel and some engines, so I can do minor adjustments. And with these orbits, there are going to be pretty minor adjustments that they'll need to become synchronized. Anyway, the big news of the day, SpaceX and their explosions. Uh, Space travel is hard. I woke up yesterday morning to the news that the SpaceX launch vehicle had exploded on the launch pad. And I watched some of the video footage that was taken by third parties, and you can find it online pretty easily. It was a disaster, and it's interesting how it was so just spontaneous. There wasn't anything really leading up to it. It just exploded on the launch pad. There are some people hypothesizing that it's probably because of the fuel mixture and how everything went together and that, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I'm not a rocket scientist. I just pretend to be one on YouTube. So, anyway, so I launched three of those low orbit satellites. This is my high orbit satellite, and so this is going to go into a polar orbit way above Kermit. And in fact, I overshoot here, so I have to turn around and bring the orbit back into a reasonable area. I want to have it way out there, but still not, conflicting with the orbit of any of the other bodies orbiting Kerbin. So this has a couple of good dishes. I'm trying to use the dishes to cover the entire Kerbin system, so it's communicating with all three of the low orbit satellites. But I realize that it doesn't have one of the correct dishes that it needs. So I launched this one to go up and rendezvous with it and dock. It has a smaller dish, which means a wider range, because that's how things work in Kerbal Space Program with with this mod. Anyway, it has less of a tight bandwidth or less of a tight focus, and so it can cover the entire satellite system that I have in low orbit. Anyway, getting this satellite to link up with the one already in the polar orbit was just a nightmare. Luckily, I had plenty of fuel, and the orbits up here are really slow. So even if I have a really bad orbit, it doesn't take that much fuel to reconcile them. However, and this is just awful. However, I was a little bit too good with correcting my orbit, as you'll see here in just a second. Yeah. Anyway, I won't talk over this. I'll just let you watch. Yeah, so the satellite that I was sending up lost all of its solar panels. The one that was already there lost half of its solar panels, and so it was getting enough power. But the one that I was sending up, the supplementary satellite, it was existing entirely off of battery power, and so I had a very small window to get it connected. And here it is. They get connected quite quickly. So these docking ports are magnet oriented, which is not how docking ports work in real life. But they end up connecting, and it works pretty well. I'm happy about that. Anyway, on to creating something that we can do with these satellites. So now we have a satellite system in place. We can send something to Mars. Well, Duna in this universe, but it's basically the analogous to Mars. So I'm going to have an orbiting satellite. This is the orbiter part, and it's going to be communicating with the satellite that's in high Kerbin orbit at all times, and then relay its communications down to the surface of Duna. Then this is the landing part. This is going to land on the surface of Duna, and it'll have its scientific payload. I start by putting a lot of scientific instruments on the outside. Then I start to think about the aerodynamic effects, and I realize that's just a bad idea. So I eventually put them into some sort of encapsulation so they can be protected from atmospheric effects. I don't want to have a SpaceX problem on my hands. No, that would suck. So yeah, here I am. I'm fiddling around with a center of mass. I want it to be able to orient itself using the atmosphere, so the atmosphere keeps it pointing in the correct direction, and it has the ablative shield always pointing into the airstream. That way it doesn't burn up. So I put the heavy batteries in the bottom chamber, and then put on that ablative shielding. I was playing around with the idea of having a third orbiter that would just stay in orbit for a second, do some science, and then crash into the surface of either Ike, which is the moon of Duna, or crash into Duna. Just because with these satellites, there's consumable scientific instruments, and once you use it, you can't do any more science with it. Ultimately, I decided against having that extra probe, and I figured I'd just put the instruments on this body here, and when I discard it, it'll just be discarded. It'll be dead. It won't be able to do anything after it's discarded, but it will be able to do the science before then. And I'm keeping a careful watch on how much delta V I have. All this weight reduces the delta V capabilities, and I need to have at least 1,000 meters per second to get from Kerbin to Duna. And so here's the transitory stage. This is to get us to Duna, and it has somewhere around 1,400 meters per second, I think. I can't actually see while I'm recording the voiceover. And then I realized, oh yeah, I need solar panels on the lander. Then I need an ascent vehicle, a launch vehicle, I guess you would call it. And so I put on as many heavy rockets as I possibly can, and it's not enough, and it's not going to give me enough thrust and all that stuff. And so yeah, I want to test this on Kerbin, see if everything works out. This lander is going to land without any communications available, so it needs to be able to do it all automated, and I'll be testing that out before next episode. And yeah, next episode will be this going to Duna and seeing any further disasters. See if we have satellites that crash into each other again. Anyway, until next time, I'm Conan Horez. Have fun.